Okay, so let me start with a question for you. Can an inanimate object move
Hmm.
without ever being pushed or acted on by something else?
For centuries, I mean, literally since Aristotle, the answer to that was a hard no, an absolute no. Everything that moves has to be moved by something external.
And that idea wasn't just, a minor philosophical point.
Sure.
It was foundational.
Oh, completely. It was the bedrock for so much of Western metaphysics. It's the whole basis of the classic kinetic proof, the argument ex motu. If everything needs an external cause for its motion, you eventually have to get to a first mover that isn't moved.
But then the 20th century happened, and it did not play by Aristotle's rules.
Not at all. And our sources for this deep dive, a really fascinating trail of academic papers and reflections, they show exactly how modern physics just pulverized that old premise.
With things like intrinsic energy, particle wave duality,
Yeah.
all the weirdness of quantum mechanics.
Exactly. And philosophers, they were forced to go back to the drawing board. They had to come up with a totally new concept to reconcile what physics was telling them, something they eventually called ruchomateria,
Motion matter.
motion matter. And that's our mission today. We're going to unpack how science forced this incredible shift in how you should perceive reality itself. Because if matter isn't inert, if it has movement baked into its very essence, well, the universe gets a lot more dynamic.
Okay, let's get into it. And our story begins, maybe surprisingly, not in a physics lab, but with an Austrian priest,
Albka?
Mitterer.
Right. Born in 1887, he was a theologian, but he was also deeply, deeply fluent in the natural sciences of his time. And his whole project was to see what metaphysics could learn from actual experimental physics.
He saw the writing on the wall pretty early, didn't he?
He really did. As early as 1934, he puts out this article that is basically the first formal challenge to that old kinetic proof. He just flat out says its core premise is scientifically false. It's obsolete.
And why was it obsolete?
Because Mitterer understood that at a fundamental level, physical bodies aren't just static lumps. They're these incredibly complex, multi-level systems.
Systems of particles that are always moving.
Always. There is no such thing as absolute rest at the quantum level. It doesn't exist.
So this theory of his, he called it hylosystemism.
Hylosystemism, yeah. He said bodies are systems of constantly moving units, he called hylons, from the Greek for matter. But here's his huge conceptual leap. He realized these units aren't just matter, they inherently contain energy.
They have both particle and wave properties.
Yes, he even coined a term for them, Jaski-Faluski.
Which is roughly particle wavelets.
Exactly, particle wavelets. It's such a brilliant term because it immediately gets to the heart of quantum mechanics, that mind-bending idea that something is both a thing and a field at the same time.
So the movement, the wave part, isn't something that happens to the matter. It's part of what the matter is.
Precisely. And by 1954, he makes this totally explicit. He says movement is a constitutive element of matter. It's part of its nature.
And that idea got traction. I mean, it went far beyond just physics journals.
It really did. Famously, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, who would become Pope Benedict XVI, he actually cited Mitterer on this. He wrote that according to modern science, movement is not something secondarily added to matter, but rather matter is moved constitutively.
That is a massive claim. It just pulls the rug out from under centuries of thinking. But Mitterer himself, he hesitated a bit, didn't he?
He did, and it's a really crucial point. Another philosopher, Pfaffenwimmer, kind of pushed him on it, saying, okay, if a body moves of its own accord, then it must be essentially movement.
And Mitterer didn't quite say yes.
He stopped short. He said, well, the motion exists because the system of particles is moving. But he couldn't quite make the final metaphysical leap to say that the individual unit, the hylon itself, was a perfect duality of matter and motion. He saw the problem, but he didn't give us the final theoretical model for it.
So he lit the fuse.
He lit the fuse. But the real philosophical explosion happens a bit later and somewhere else entirely. We jump to Poland in 1949.
And the context there is intense.
Oh, very. In Polish academic circles, the neo-scholastic tradition was dominant, and for them, the kinetic proof was absolutely sacred. It was the proof. It wasn't just a theory. It was dogma.
And into this steps the challenger, Father Professor Kazimierz Kusak.
Cusack, yes. And he was trained in a school of thought that stressed the link between metaphysics and real contemporary science. And he publishes this article that basically says, we have to abandon the kinetic proof.
And his argument was just about intellectual honesty.
It was. He just said, look, the core premise that a body can be completely motionless is empirically, scientifically false. So any argument you build on it is unsound. He said all the movement we see can be explained by nature's own forces.
So that's specific proof for a first mover. It's just not necessary.
Right, and you have to remember the time and place. This is during rising communist terror in Poland.
Marxists were using that outdated argument to attack theism.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
Krusok knew that tying your entire philosophical position to something that had, as he put it, lost touch with physical reality was just intellectual suicide. It took incredible courage.
And this, of course, creates a huge debate. And someone who supported him was Tadeusz Wojciechowski.
Yes, and Wojciechowski is the one who gives us the next critical piece of the puzzle. He agreed matter was dynamic, but he knew you couldn't just say that. You had to give it a formal place in the old framework.
The framework of potentiality and act.
Right, and this leads to his great innovation, the concept of the partial act, act Cheskui.
Okay, let's slow down here because this feels like the bridge between the old and the new.
It is the bridge, absolutely. So traditional metaphysics says a thing is either in potentiality, like a log that could be a fire, or it's an act, meaning it is a fire. It's a binary.
But matter at the quantum level isn't just sitting there waiting.
Oh,
It's got
yeah.
forces, it's got energy.
Exactly. It's not in a state of pure potentiality, but it's not a fully realized pure act either because it can still change. It needed a new category,
A partial act.
the partial act, something that is moved by an act residing within itself. Think of it like a fully charged battery. The potential to do work is already there, active, inherent to its structure, even if it's just sitting on a table at rest.
So Wojciechowski creates a triad. Potentiality.
Yep.
Partial act.
Yes. Munashak Cheskui Act. It was a brilliant move that gave Mitterer's constitutive motion a proper metaphysical home.
But it just stalled.
It did, unfortunately. The whole debate kind of fizzled out, unresolved, in 1968 after a seminar led by a certain Archbishop Karol Wojtyła.
Later Pope John Paul II.
The very same. The two sides just couldn't find the common language to move forward.
And this is where we can step in and sort of finish the job. We
Excellent.
can synthesize the insights from Mitterer and Wojciechowski with what we know from physics today.
Right. So let's start with two basic, undisputed premises from physics. One, every particle contains matter.
Okay.
Two, every wave contains movement or energy. And since we know that corpuscle wave duality is real, the only logical metaphysical conclusion is that a material motion duality must also exist.
And this unified essence is what we're calling ruchomateria, motion matter.
Yes. And it means movement isn't just an attribute of matter like its color. They are two equally real, equally substantial realities, two issued within a single essence.
So let's just redefine them. So matter becomes the dynamic essence, the potential, the power.
The power to be a structured thing,
Yeah.
yes. And movement becomes the energetic essence, the act, the energy.
Energy, yeah.
Okay, so let me just check my understanding here. What about something we think of as pure energy, like a photon? How does that fit in?
That's a perfect question. In this model, even a photon, which is mostly energetic essence movement, it still has to possess a substrate of the dynamic essence of matter.
So they're inseparable.
Completely inseparable. One can't exist without the other. And that energetic essence, that is Wojciechowski's partial act, the intrinsic source of its own motion. Okay, got it. So this self-moving stuff still needs structure, right? It needs rules. It needs form.
Absolutely. So the old idea of hylomorphism matter plus form, that has to evolve. We need to explicitly add motion into the mix.
Giving us hylokinetomorphism. Matter, motion, and form.
Right. And physics relies on this idea of form constantly, even if they don't use the word. The mass, the charge, the spin of a particle, that's all information. That's its form. Without it, you couldn't identify anything.
And since ruchomateria is dual, the form must also be dual.
It has to be. You have the dynamic part of the form, which determines the particle structure, and the energetic part of the form, which determines its internal intrinsic motion, its wave properties. It's a perfect metaphysical mirror of Mitterer's particle wavelet.
Okay. So matter is dynamic, it's dual, it's self-moving. But here is where it gets really strange.
This is where we get to the great surprise.
When you look at those beautiful arsing particle tracks in a bubble chamber, you have to ask a very basic question. How does that little something know to turn right or left in a magnetic field? How does it know the rules?
Are things just being inertly shoved around, or are they a way of their environment?
The philosophical reading of the evidence points to awareness, that these particles actually know the field is there and they want to move in a certain way.
Whoa, hold on. We're talking about ruchomaterial consciousness.
We are. But we have to be incredibly, incredibly clear here. This is not self-awareness. It's not thinking. It's not feeling pain.
So what is it?
It's a primary fundamental awareness,
Yeah.
the ability to perceive a stimulus and react according to your nature. The sources actually point to an old concept, vita primitiva, or primary life.
Primary life.
Think of a plant turning toward the sun. It detects the light and it executes the reaction that's built into its nature. It's that basic detection and reaction.
So the conscious part of the form has to be dual too. Of course, it needs two faculties. The sources call them by some complex Polish names, but we can simplify them. You need detectors and you need desires.
The detectors perceive the stimulus, the magnetic field.
And the desires are the faculty for appetition. They determine the response. The particle's nature desires to follow the path of least resistance, the most stable trajectory, and so it makes that perfect arc.
And this isn't just philosophy spinning in a void. There's support for this from physics.
Indirectly, yes. The sources point to reports from people like Dr. Krzysztof Kutak at the Polish Academy of Sciences. He talks about how a photon needs to sense or feel the inside of a proton before it interacts. That's the language of physics bumping up against the language of detection and reaction.
Okay, but if this thing is constantly detecting and reacting, how does it stay itself?
Yeah.
Why is an electron today the same electron it was a billion years ago? What gives it identity?
That forces us to posit one last thing. Oruko material self-adjusture, a principle of identity conservation.
The thing that ensures it remains itself.
Yes, it's the blueprint. And this self is what explains four huge observable facts about our universe. 1, why objects stay in an optimal energy state. 2, why they conserve energy and momentum. 3, why they don't just pop in and out of existence. And 4, why their interactions follow predictable, repeatable patterns. It's what makes a particle an individual.
So when you put all of these pieces together, the picture of matter that emerges is just vastly richer than the old one.
Infinitely. The universe at its most basic level isn't the static, inert thing waiting for a push. It's dynamic, it's energetic, and it's fundamentally aware in this very primary sense.
And the core idea we've been unpacking, Ruko materia, this dual unity of matter and motion, it has a beautiful parallel right in the heart of modern physics.
Space-time.
Exactly, space-time, a dual unity of space and time. You can't have one without the other. They are a single, unified essence.
And realizing that was one of the greatest breakthroughs in our understanding of the cosmos.
So considering that pattern, it leaves you with a pretty big final thought to mull over. What other things that we treat as totally separate, like, say, mind and body, or maybe even information and structure, might actually be inseparable, unified essences, just waiting for their own synthesis? Something to think about the next time you see the world moving around you.